I never thought a single Tuesday morning could unravel my entire life. At 62, I believed I had seen it all: joy, heartbreak, triumph, and loss. But nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal that was about to surface. My husband, Victor, had passed away 3 months ago, leaving behind not just a void in my heart, but also a legacy he had worked tirelessly to build. I thought I knew what was coming. I thought I was ready. I was wrong. The call came at exactly 8:45 a.m. "Mrs. Calloway, this is Amanda from Prescott and Finch. We're ready to finalize the estate settlement. Can you be here at 1 p.m. today?" The woman's voice was clipped, professional, and devoid of any warmth. I agreed, of course. After months of waiting, I was eager to close this chapter and move forward. Victor would have wanted that. I chose my emerald green dress, the one Victor always said made my eyes sparkle. He had bought it for me on our 30th wedding anniversary just 2 years ago. As I clasped the gold locket he had given me on our wedding day, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked older, more fragile than I remembered. Grief had carved deep lines around my eyes, and my once dark hair was now streaked with silver. But there was still strength in my gaze, a determination to honor Victor's memory and protect what he had left behind. The drive to the law office downtown was uneventful at first. Traffic was light, and the radio played softly in the background. But as I pulled into the underground parking garage, a strange unease settled over me. The air felt heavy, the dim fluorescent lights casting long, eerie shadows across the concrete walls. I parked my car and reached for my purse when I heard it, a voice calling out from the shadows. "Ma'am, wait! Don't start that car!" I froze, my hand hovering over the door handle. Turning, I saw a man emerging from behind one of the concrete pillars. He looked disheveled, his clothes worn and his face weathered by years of hardship. His eyes, however, were sharp and filled with urgency. "Mrs. Calloway?" he asked, his voice low but steady. "Victor's wife?" My heart began to race. "Who are you? How do you know my name?" I demanded, gripping my purse tightly. "Please, ma'am, I'm not here to hurt you," he said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "My name is Sam. I used to work for Prescott and Finch. I was a paralegal there for 15 years before they let me go. But before they fired me, I overheard things. Things about your husband's will." I stared at him, my mind racing. Prescott and Finch was Victor's law firm, the same firm I was about to meet with. How could this man, a stranger, know anything about Victor's will? "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice trembling. "And I don't have time for this." "Please," Sam pleaded, stepping closer but keeping a respectful distance. "Your daughter-in-law, Celeste, she's been working with people at the firm. They're planning to alter the will. They've been telling people you're not mentally fit to handle the estate." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's impossible," I said, shaking my head. "I've never been diagnosed with anything. I'm perfectly fine." "I know," Sam said, his voice filled with urgency. "But they've been forging documents, medical records, statements from people claiming you've been acting confused, forgetful. They're trying to make it look like Victor wanted to change his will in his final weeks." My knees felt weak, and I leaned against the car for support. "Why would Celeste do this? She's my daughter-in-law. She's family." Sam hesitated, glancing around the garage as if he feared we were being watched. "Because she and your son, Daniel, are drowning in debt. They've mortgaged their house twice, and his business is failing. They see the estate as their way out." I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. Daniel, my only son, had always been so proud, so independent. He would never ask for help, but to think he might be complicit in something like this. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because Victor was a good man," Sam said simply. "He treated everyone with respect, even the people most would overlook. He didn't deserve this, and neither do you." Before I could respond, the elevator dinged in the distance. Sam stepped back into the shadows. "Be careful in there, Mrs. Calloway," he said. "They're expecting you to just sign the papers without reading them. Don't let them pressure you." And then he was gone, disappearing into the dimly lit garage as quickly as he had appeared. I stood there for several moments, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to dismiss his warning as the ramblings of a disgruntled former employee. But another part of me, the part that had spent 32 years by Victor's side, trusted my instincts. And my instincts told me Sam was telling the truth. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Sam watching me from behind a pillar, his expression filled with worry. The 14th floor of Prescott and Finch was as cold and imposing as I remembered. The reception area was all polished marble and glass, designed to intimidate. The receptionist greeted me with a practiced smile. "Mrs. Calloway, they're waiting for you in conference room B." I nodded and made my way down the hallway, my heels clicking against the floor. The air felt heavy, the silence oppressive. When I reached the frosted glass doors of the conference room, I paused, my hand on the brass handle. Through the glass, I could see several figures seated around the table. One of them was unmistakably Celeste, her sleek blonde hair pulled back into a perfect chignon. Taking another deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room was exactly as I had expected, intimidating. 3 men in expensive suits sat on one side of the table, with Celeste on the other. She looked up as I entered, and for just a moment I saw something flash across her face. Surprise? Fear? It was gone so quickly I almost thought I had imagined it. "Margaret," she said, her voice warm and sweet, the way it always was when she wanted something. "I wasn't sure you'd make it today." "Of course I'm here," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "This is about Victor's estate. Why wouldn't I be?" The lead attorney, a tall man with silver hair and a cold smile, gestured to an empty chair. "Mrs. Calloway, please have a seat. We have several documents that require your signature today." As I sat down, I noticed Celeste fidgeting with her bracelet, twisting it around her wrist repeatedly. She wouldn't meet my eyes directly, instead focusing on the stack of papers in front of her. "Before we begin," I said, placing my purse on the table, "I'd like to understand exactly what we're discussing today. Victor and I went over his will many times. I'm familiar with his wishes." The attorney exchanged a quick glance with his colleagues. "Mrs. Calloway, there have been some recent developments. Your husband made certain amendments to his will in his final weeks, expressing concerns about—" "Stop," I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "What kind of concerns?" Celeste finally looked at me, her eyes wide with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Margaret, Victor was worried about your health. He mentioned several incidents where you seemed confused, forgetful. He wanted to make sure the estate was handled properly." The words felt like a slap across my face. "What incidents?" I demanded. One of the other attorneys slid a folder across the table. "Mrs. Calloway, we have documentation of several occasions where family members noted concerning behavior, memory lapses, confusion about dates and names, difficulty managing household finances." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were what appeared to be medical reports, written statements, even photographs. My breath caught as I recognized Celeste's handwriting on one of the statements, dated just 6 weeks ago. Margaret became extremely agitated when asked about grocery shopping. I read aloud. She couldn't remember what she had purchased or how much money she had spent. When Daniel tried to help her organize her receipts, she accused him of trying to steal from her. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. "This is completely false," I said, my voice rising. "I have never accused Daniel of stealing anything." "Margaret," Celeste said softly, her tone dripping with pity. "You did say those things. We were all so worried about you." I stared at her. This woman I had welcomed into my family, who had smiled at me across countless dinner tables. The person sitting across from me now was a stranger. "What arrangements?" I asked, my voice cold. The lead attorney cleared his throat. "Your husband amended his will to establish a trust. The estate would be managed by a trustee, in this case, your son, Daniel, with provisions for your care and living expenses." The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "You're telling me Victor didn't trust me to handle my own finances?" "It wasn't about trust," Celeste said quickly. "It was about protection. Victor loved you so much, Margaret. He just wanted to make sure you were taken care of." I closed my eyes, trying to process what was happening. When I opened them again, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. In the corner of the conference room, I spotted a small recording device, its red light blinking steadily. "Are you recording this meeting?" I asked. The attorneys looked uncomfortable. "It's standard practice for estate settlements," one of them said. "Standard practice to record a grieving widow without her consent?" I shot back. Before anyone could answer, there was a soft knock on the door. A secretary peered in. "Mr. Prescott, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." The lead attorney frowned. "We're in the middle of a meeting." "Sir?" "He says his name is Sam Grayson, and he has information about this case." I watched as all the color drained from Celeste's face. She looked like she might be sick. "I don't know anyone by that name," Prescott said quickly. "Tell him we're busy." "Actually," I said, standing up, "I'd like to hear what Mr. Grayson has to say." The room fell silent as the secretary hesitated in the doorway, her eyes darting nervously between me and the attorneys. "Shall I send him in, Mrs. Calloway?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I said firmly, my gaze locked on Celeste. "Send him in." "Margaret, I don't think this is necessary," Celeste interjected, her voice higher than usual, her composure beginning to crack. "We should focus on the documents. This is a delicate process, and we don't want to complicate things." I ignored her, my heart pounding as the door opened wider. Sam stepped into the room, his presence a stark contrast to the polished, intimidating atmosphere of the conference room. He was wearing the same worn jacket and scuffed boots I had seen earlier, but his posture was confident, his expression resolute. He carried a battered messenger bag slung over one shoulder, and I noticed the way his eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, nodding respectfully in my direction. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have something you need to see." Prescott, the lead attorney, stood abruptly, his face a mask of irritation. "Mr. Grayson, you are trespassing. This is a private meeting and you have no business here." Sam didn't flinch. "I think Mrs. Calloway would disagree," he said calmly. "I have evidence that directly impacts this case." "Evidence?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "What kind of evidence?" Sam reached into his bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. "Copies of the original documents," he said. placing the folder on the table in front of me. Your husband's real will, dated 6 months ago, and the authentic medical reports from his doctor before they were altered. The room went deathly quiet. I could feel the tension radiating from the attorneys, their carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. Celeste's face had gone pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the table. "This is absurd," Prescott said, his voice rising. "This man is clearly unstable. He was terminated from our firm for misconduct. Anything he says is unreliable." Sam turned to him, his expression hard. "I was terminated because I refused to participate in your schemes. I know exactly what you've been doing, helping clients manipulate wills, forging documents, and taking bribes to make inconvenient family members disappear from inheritance plans. And I have the receipts to prove it." Prescott's face turned an alarming shade of red. "This is slander! You have no proof—" "I have everything," Sam interrupted, his voice cutting through the attorney's bluster like a knife. "Emails, invoices, even recordings of conversations. You thought firing me would make me go away, but all it did was give me more time to gather evidence." I opened the folder with trembling hands, my eyes scanning the documents inside. There, it was, Victor's original will, his signature unmistakable, the handwriting I had seen 1,000 times over the years. The provisions were exactly as he had described to me. Everything left to me, with a trust established for Daniel and his family after my passing. No amendments, no changes, no doubts about my ability to manage the estate. Tears blurred my vision as I turned to the next set of documents. The medical reports were equally damning. The originals, signed by Victor's longtime physician, stated that he was of sound mind and had full confidence in my ability to handle our finances. The forged versions, however, painted a very different picture, one of confusion, paranoia, and concern for my mental state. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. I turned to Celeste, who was now visibly shaking, her carefully constructed mask of innocence slipping away. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her eyes darting to Prescott as if seeking guidance. "This is all a misunderstanding. Victor, he wanted to make sure you were protected." "Stop lying," I snapped, slamming the folder shut. "I've seen the truth. Victor never doubted me. He never changed his will. This was all you." Celeste's composure shattered. She slumped back in her chair, her face buried in her hands. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We were desperate. Daniel's business is failing, the house is underwater, and the creditors won't stop calling. You thought you could steal from me," I said coldly. "You thought you could manipulate me, destroy my reputation, and take what Victor worked his entire life to build." Prescott cleared his throat, his voice shaky, but still attempting to maintain authority. "Mrs. Calloway, I think it's clear that emotions are running high. Perhaps we should adjourn this meeting and reconvene at a later date." "No," I said firmly, cutting him off. "We're not adjourning anything. This ends now." Sam stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. "Mrs. Calloway, I've already contacted the authorities. They're on their way. The evidence I've provided is more than enough to launch a full investigation into Prescott and Finch's practices." Celeste let out a small, choked sob, her head sinking lower. Prescott and the other attorneys exchanged panicked glances, their confidence unraveling with every passing second. The door to the conference room opened again, and 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside, followed by a woman in a sharp, high navy suit. She introduced herself as Detective Elena Morales, her tone professional but firm. "Mrs. Calloway," she said, nodding in my direction. "We've received a report of potential fraud and forgery involving your late husband's estate. I'd like to ask you a few questions." I nodded, my voice steady despite the chaos around me. "Of course, Detective, I'll tell you everything." Detective Morales turned to Prescott, her expression hard. "Mr. Prescott, we'll need to see all records related to Mr. Calloway's estate. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll obtain a warrant." Prescott's bravado crumbled. "There's no need for that," he said quickly. "We'll provide whatever you need." As the officers began collecting evidence and taking statements, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The truth was finally coming to light, and the people who had tried to betray me would face the consequences of their actions. But as I looked at Celeste, slumped in her chair and staring blankly at the table, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. This was the woman I had welcomed into my family, the mother of my grandchildren, the person I had trusted to love and support my son. How had it come to this? "Why?" I asked her softly, my voice filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. "Why would you do this to me?" She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "I didn't know what else to do," she said, her voice breaking. "We were drowning, Margaret. The debts, the pressure. It was too much. I thought if I could just fix it, everything would be okay." "By destroying me?" I asked, my voice rising. "By turning my own son against me? By tarnishing Victor's memory with lies and deceit?" Celeste had no answer. She simply looked away, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Detective Morales approached me, her expression sympathetic. "Mrs. Calloway, we'll need you to come to the station to give a formal statement, and we'll need to take these documents as evidence." I nodded, gathering my things. As I stood to leave, I turned to Sam, who was watching the scene unfold, with quiet determination. "Thank you," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. "You didn't have to do this, but you did. You saved me." Sam gave me a small, humble smile. "Victor was a good man," he said simply. "He deserved better than this. So do you." As I walked out of the conference room, flanked by Detective Morales and the officers, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, sadness, and a renewed sense of purpose. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time in months, I felt like I had the strength to fight. The ride to the police station was quiet, but my mind was anything but. The events of the past hour replayed in my head like a broken record. Celeste's trembling hands, the forged documents, Sam's unwavering determination to expose the truth. It all felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I clutched Victor's locket around my neck, the cool metal grounding me as I tried to process everything. Detective Morales sat beside me in the back seat of the police car, her notepad balanced on her knee. She had a calm, no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of Victor in his younger years. He had always been the steady one, the voice of reason when life became chaotic. I wished he were here now, guiding me through this storm. "Mrs. Calloway," Morales said, breaking the silence, "I know this is overwhelming, but I need to ask you a few questions before we arrive at the station. It'll help us get a clearer picture of what's going on." I nodded, my voice too shaky to respond. "Can you tell me about your relationship with your daughter-in-law, Celeste?" she asked, her pen poised to write. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my thoughts. Celeste came into our lives about 8 years ago. My son, Daniel, met her at a charity gala. She was charming, intelligent, and seemed to adore him. Victor and I welcomed her with open arms. She was family. Morales nodded, her expression neutral but attentive. Did you ever notice anything unusual about her behavior? Anything that might have raised red flags? I hesitated, thinking back over the years. Not at first. She was always so perfect. Too perfect, maybe. She said all the right things, did all the right things. But over time, I started noticing little things. The way she would steer conversations away from me during family gatherings. The way she whispered to Daniel when she thought I wasn't looking. It was subtle, but it was there. "And your son?" Morales asked. "What's your relationship like with him?" Tears pricked my eyes as I thought about Daniel. He's my only child. Victor and I raised him to be honest, hardworking, and kind. He's always been independent, maybe a little too proud at times, but he's a good man. Or at least I thought he was. Morales jotted down a few notes before looking up at me. "Do you think he was involved in this scheme?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been avoiding it, clinging to the hope that Daniel was as much a victim as I was. But deep down, I wasn't sure. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want to believe he didn't know that Celeste manipulated him. But the fact that he didn't come to me, didn't ask for help. It makes me question everything." Morales nodded, her expression softening. "It's not uncommon in cases like this. Financial desperation can make people do things they'd never consider otherwise. But that doesn't excuse what's been done to you." I nodded, grateful for her understanding. "Victor would have helped them," I said, my voice breaking. "If they had just come to us, we would have done everything we could to help. But instead, they chose to betray me." The car pulled into the station's parking lot, and Morales placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Mrs. Calloway. I promise." The next few hours were a blur of paperwork, interviews, and evidence collection. Sam's documents were handed over to the detectives, who examined them with meticulous care. I gave my formal statement, recounting everything that had happened since Victor's death. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but I knew it was necessary. By the time I left the station, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the city. I felt drained, as if the weight of the betrayal had seeped into my very bones. But there was also a flicker of hope, a sense that justice might finally be within reach. As I stepped outside, I saw Sam waiting near the entrance, his hands shoved into the pockets of his worn jacket. He looked up as I approached, his expression a mix of concern and relief. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, his voice warm. "How are you holding up?" I managed a small smile. "I've been better, but I'll survive. Thanks to you." He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. I just did what I thought was right." "You risked everything to help me," I said, my voice firm. "That's not something I take lightly. Victor would have been proud of you." Sam's eyes softened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of vulnerability beneath his tough exterior. "Victor was a good man," he said quietly. "He treated everyone with respect, no matter their circumstances. The least I could do was honor his memory." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the day settling over us. Finally, Sam cleared his throat and reached into his bag. "I thought you might want this," he said, handing me a small envelope. "It's a letter Victor wrote to the firm a few months before he passed. I found it in the files they tried to destroy." My hands trembled as I took the envelope, the familiar handwriting on the front making my heart ache. "Thank you." I whispered, clutching it to my chest. Sam nodded, his expression resolute. If you need anything, anything at all, you know where to find me. I watched as he walked away, disappearing into the evening shadows. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't alone in this fight. I had allies, people who believed in me and in the truth. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope resting in front of me. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that had become all too familiar since Victor's passing. I hesitated, my fingers tracing the edges of the envelope. Part of me was afraid to open it, afraid of what it might say. But I knew I had to. Taking a deep breath, I carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. Victor's handwriting was neat and precise, just as I remembered. As I began to read, tears streamed down my face. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer by your side. I can't begin to imagine how difficult that must be for you, but I need you to know something. I trust you completely. You've been my partner, my rock, and my greatest love for over 3 decades. Everything I've built, everything I've worked for, was for you. I know you'll face challenges after I'm gone. People may try to take advantage of your kindness, your generosity, but I also know you're stronger than you realize. You have a fire in you, Margaret, a strength that has carried us through every storm. Trust yourself, and don't let anyone make you doubt your worth. I love you more than words can express. Thank you for sharing your life with me. Forever yours, Victor. I clutched the letter to my chest, sobbing quietly. Victor's words were a lifeline, a reminder of the love and trust we had shared. He had believed in me, even in his final days. And I would honor that belief by fighting for the truth. The next morning, I woke with a renewed sense of purpose. There was still so much to do, confronting Daniel, navigating the legal battle ahead, but I was ready. Victor's letter had given me the strength I needed to face whatever came next. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Daniel. Mom, we need to talk, please. I stared at the message, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, sadness, and longing. I wanted to believe that Daniel was innocent, that he had been manipulated by Celeste, but the doubt lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. After a moment's hesitation, I typed a response. Come by the house at 2 hours. We'll talk then. At exactly 2 hours, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Daniel standing on the porch, his face pale and drawn. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usually neat appearance disheveled. Behind him stood Celeste, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Mom, Daniel said, his voice cracking. Thank you for seeing us. I stepped aside, motioning for them to come in. Let's talk in the living room. They sat on the couch, the same couch where Victor and I had shared so many happy memories. The weight of their betrayal hung, heavy in the air, making the room feel smaller, suffocating. Mom, Daniel began, his voice trembling. I don't even know where to start. Detective Morales told me everything, about the forged documents, the lies, the scheme to change. Dad's will. I swear to you, I didn't know. I didn't know what Celeste was doing. I studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. You didn't know she was forging documents, I said slowly. But you knew about the debts. You knew you were in trouble and you didn't come to me. Why? Daniel's shoulders slumped, and he buried his face in his hands. I was ashamed, he admitted. I didn't want you to see me as a failure. I thought I could fix it on my own, but the more I tried, the worse it got. And then Celeste, she convinced me that Dad had doubts about you, that he wanted to make sure you were taken care of. I believed her, Mom. I believed her lies. I turned to Celeste, who had been silent until now. And you, I said, my voice cold. Why? Why would you do this to me? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. I was desperate, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The debts were crushing us, and I didn't see a way out. I thought if I could just control the estate, I could fix everything. I didn't mean to hurt you, Margaret. I just didn't know what else to do. You didn't mean to hurt me, I repeated, my voice rising. You tried to destroy me. You manipulated my son, forged documents, and tarnished Victor's memory. How can you sit there and say you didn't mean to hurt me? Celeste broke down, sobbing into her hands. Daniel reached out to comfort her, but I stopped him with a sharp look. Don't, I said. She doesn't deserve your sympathy, right? Now. Daniel hesitated, then pulled his hand back, his expression conflicted. I want to believe you didn't know, Daniel, I said, my voice softening. But trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. It takes time, and it takes effort. Are you willing to put in that effort? He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I'll do whatever it takes, Mom. I promise. I turned back to Celeste. And you? Are you willing to face the consequences of your actions? She nodded, her sobs quieting. Yes, I'll cooperate with the investigation. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I studied her for a long moment, trying to decide if I believed her. Finally, I nodded. Good, because this isn't just about me. It's about Victor, about the legacy he left behind. And I won't let anyone tarnish that, not even family. The days following Daniel and Celeste's visit were some of the longest of my life. The house felt heavier, quieter, as if the walls themselves were absorbing the weight of everything that had happened. I spent hours replaying our conversation, dissecting every word, every expression, every tear. Was Daniel truly innocent, or was he just a better liar than I had given him credit for? And Celeste? Was her remorse genuine, or was it just another performance, another calculated move to save herself? I didn't know, and that uncertainty gnawed at me like a slow, relentless ache. The investigation into Prescott and Finch was moving quickly. Detective Morales called me every few days with updates, her voice steady and reassuring. The evidence Sam had provided was damning. Emails, invoices, and even audio recordings that detailed the firm's involvement in multiple cases of fraud and forgery. It wasn't just my family they had targeted. There were others, too. Elderly clients with substantial estates, vulnerable individuals who trusted the firm to act in their best interests. The scale of their corruption was staggering. They're going to face serious charges, Morales told me during one of our calls. The district attorney is building a strong case, and with Celeste's cooperation, we'll have even more leverage. Celeste is cooperating? I asked, surprised. She's agreed to testify against the firm, Morales confirmed. In exchange, the DA is considering a plea deal. Probation, community service, and full restitution of the legal fees she paid to Prescott and Finch. Didn't know how to feel about that. On one hand, I wanted her to face the full weight of the law for what she had done. On the other hand, I couldn't deny that her testimony would be invaluable in bringing down the firm. And maybe, just maybe, it was a sign that she was trying to make amends. But could I ever forgive her? That was a question I still didn't have an answer to. One afternoon, about a week after Daniel and Celeste's visit, I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I hesitated. But then I opened it to find Sam standing on the porch, holding a small potted plant in his hands. "Sam," I said, surprised but pleased. "What are you doing here?" He shrugged, a sheepish smile on his face. "I thought you could use some company, and I brought this." He held up the plant, a vibrant green fern in a simple ceramic pot. "It's not much, but I figured it might brighten up the place." I smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thank you. Come in." We sat in the kitchen, the fern sitting proudly in the center of the table. I made us both a cup of tea, and while we just talked, about the investigation, about Victor, about life. Sam had a way of putting me at ease, his quiet strength and unassuming kindness a balm for my frayed nerves. "You know," he said after a while, "I've been thinking about something Victor said to me once. It was a few years ago, back when I was still working at the firm. He came in for a meeting and we ended up chatting for a bit afterward. He told me, the measure of a person isn't how they act when things are easy. It's how they act when everything falls apart." I felt a lump form in my throat. That sounded exactly like something Victor would say. He had always believed in the power of resilience, in the importance of staying true to your values even in the face of adversity. "I think he'd be proud of you," Sam continued. "You've been through hell, but you're still standing. You're still fighting." I looked down at my tea, the steam curling up in delicate tendrils. "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "I feel lost, betrayed, like I don't know who to trust anymore." "That's normal," Sam said gently, "but you're stronger than you think. And you're not alone in this." I looked up at him, gratitude swelling in my chest. "Thank you, Sam, for everything." He smiled, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. A few days later, Daniel called me again. His voice was hesitant, almost timid, as if he were afraid of what I might say. "Mom," he began, "I know I don't deserve it, but can I come over? I need to talk to you." I hesitated, my heart torn. Part of me wanted to shut him out, to protect myself from further pain. But another part of me, the part that still saw him as the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and wide, tearful eyes, couldn't say no. "Come by tomorrow," I said finally. "We'll talk then." The next day, Daniel arrived, promptly at noon. He looked better than he had during his last visit, less haggard, more composed, but there was still a heaviness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He was carrying a small box, which he set down on the coffee table as we sat in the living room. "What's this?" I asked, eyeing the box warily. "It's everything," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Bank statements, credit, card bills, loan documents. I wanted you to see the full picture. I wanted you to understand." I opened the box and began sifting through the papers. The numbers were staggering, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, spread across multiple accounts. Mortgages, business loans, maxed out credit cards. It was worse than I had imagined. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me you were in trouble?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his expression pained. "I didn't want to disappoint you," he said. "You and Dad, you always had everything together. You built this amazing life, and I didn't want you to see how badly I had screwed up." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "Daniel, we would have helped you. Victor and I would have done anything to support you. But instead, You let Celeste manipulate you into doubting me, into betraying me. I know, he said, his voice breaking. I know, and I hate myself for it. I should have seen what she was doing. I should have trusted you. But I didn't. And I'll never forgive myself for that. I looked at him, my heart aching. Do you love her? I asked softly. He hesitated, his eyes filled with conflict. I don't know, he admitted. I thought I did. But now I don't know if I ever really knew her. I nodded, understanding his pain all too well. Love isn't enough, Daniel, I said gently. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. And once it's broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I want to make this right, Mom. I don't know how, but I'll do whatever it takes. I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it tightly. We'll figure it out, I said, together. Over the next few weeks, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Prescott and Finch was officially shut down, its partners facing multiple charges of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Celeste's testimony was instrumental in securing their convictions, and while I still struggled to forgive her, I couldn't deny that her cooperation had made a difference. As for Daniel, he began the long, difficult process of rebuilding his life. He sold the house, downsized to a modest apartment, and started working tirelessly to pay off his debts. He also began attending therapy, something I had suggested during one of our conversations. It's helping, he told me one day over coffee. I'm starting to understand why I made the choices I did, why I let things get so out of control. It's not easy, but I think I'm finally on the right path. I nodded, pride swelling in my chest. Your father would be proud of you, I said. And so am I. One crisp autumn morning, I found myself sitting on the back porch, a cup of tea in hand. The garden was alive with color, the leaves on the maple tree turning brilliant shades of red and gold. It was the kind of morning Victor would have loved, and I felt his presence in the gentle rustle of the wind, in the warmth of the sun on my face. Sam joined me a few minutes later, carrying a tray with 2 cups of coffee. He had become a regular presence in my life, helping me with the garden, fixing things around the house, and simply being there when I needed someone to talk to. Beautiful day, isn't it? He said, setting the tray down and taking a seat beside me. It is, I agreed, a small smile tugging at my lips. It feels like a new beginning. He nodded, his gaze thoughtful. You've been through a lot, Margaret. But you've come out the other side stronger. Victor would be proud of you. I looked at him, gratitude swelling in my chest. Thank you, Sam, for everything. He smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew I wasn't walking it alone. I had my son, my memories of Victor, and the quiet strength of a man who had risked everything to do what was right. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. The few weeks turned into months, and slowly, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The chaos that had consumed my world after Victor's death was finally giving way to something quieter, something steadier. But it wasn't the same life I had before. It couldn't be. Too much had changed. Too much had been lost. And yet, in the midst of all the pain and betrayal, there was also something new, a sense of clarity, of purpose, of resilience. The investigation into Prescott and Finch had concluded, and the firm's partners were now facing lengthy prison sentences. The trial had been a spectacle, with Celeste's testimony serving as the final nail in their coffin. Watching her take the stand had been surreal. She had looked so small, so fragile, as she recounted the details of their scheme. And yet there was a strength in her voice, a determination to take responsibility for her actions that I hadn't expected. When the verdict was announced, guilty on all counts, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Justice had been served, not just for me, but for all the other families they had exploited. But it was a bittersweet victory. No amount of prison time could undo the damage that had been done, the trust that had been broken. Daniel was making progress too. He had thrown himself into rebuilding his life, working tirelessly to pay off his debts and repair the relationships that had been fractured by Celeste's betrayal. He had moved into a modest apartment downtown, far from the sprawling house in the suburbs that had once been a symbol of his success. It was a humbling experience for him, but also a transformative one. "I've been thinking a lot about Dad," he told me one afternoon as we sat in the garden, "about the kind of man he was, the kind of man he wanted me to be. I let him down, Mom. I let you down. But I'm trying to make it right." I reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Your father believed in second chances," I said. "And so do I. You're doing the work, Daniel. That's what matters." He nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me. It wasn't easy, rebuilding our relationship. There were still moments of tension, moments when the pain of what had happened threatened to resurface. But we were both committed to moving forward, to finding a way back to the bond we had once shared. And slowly, we were getting there. Celeste, on the other hand, was a more complicated story. After the trial, she had been sentenced to 3 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and full restitution of the legal fees she had paid to Prescott and Finch. It wasn't the harsh punishment I had initially hoped for, but it was a start. And to her credit, she seemed determined to make the most of her second chance. She had been assigned to work at a local food bank, helping to prepare and serve meals for people experiencing homelessness. It was a humbling experience for her, one that forced her to confront the consequences of her actions in a very real way. Sam, who volunteered at the same food bank, told me that she was working hard, keeping her head down, and doing her best to make amends. "She's not the same person she was," he said one day as we worked in the garden. "I think she's starting to understand what desperation really looks like, what it feels like to lose everything. It's changing her." I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Part of me wanted to believe that people could change, that Celeste could become someone better. But another part of me, the part that still felt the sting of her betrayal, wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. In the months following the trial, I found myself drawn to the idea of helping others who had been through similar experiences. Victor's legacy wasn't just about the money he had left behind. It was about the values he had lived by: honesty, integrity, and compassion. I wanted to honor that legacy in a way that felt meaningful. With Sam's help, I began volunteering at the local library, tutoring adults who were learning to read. It was a small thing, but it brought me a sense of purpose, a sense of connection. I also started working with Detective Morales' department to educate seniors about financial exploitation, sharing my story in the hopes of preventing others from falling victim to similar schemes. "It's not just about the money," I told a group of seniors during one of our workshops. "It's about trust. When someone you love betrays you, it shakes you to your core. But you can survive it. You can rebuild. You're stronger than you think." The response was overwhelming. People came up to me afterward, sharing their own stories of betrayal and resilience. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone, that my pain wasn't unique. And in that shared experience, I found healing. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat on the back porch with Sam, a cup of tea in my hands. The garden was alive with the sounds of summer. Crickets chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze. It was a peaceful moment, one that felt hard-earned. "You've come a long way, Margaret," Sam said, his voice warm and steady. "You should be proud of yourself." I smiled, looking out at the garden Victor and I had planted together so many years ago. "I think he'd be proud of me too," I said softly. "And of you. You've been my rock through all of this, Sam. I don't know what I would have done without you." He looked down, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. "You don't owe me anything, Margaret. I just did what I thought was right." "You did more than that," I said, my voice firm. "You gave me back my life, and I'll never forget that." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. It wasn't the life I had imagined for myself, but it was a good life. A life filled with purpose, with connection, with quiet strength. 6 months after the trial, I hosted a small gathering at the house to celebrate what would have been Victor's 65th birthday. It was a simple affair, just close friends and family, gathered in the garden he had loved so much. Daniel was there, looking healthier and happier than I had seen him in years. Sam was there too, his presence a quiet but steady comfort. As we raised our glasses to toast Victor's memory, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. His legacy wasn't just the money he had left behind. It was the love, the values, and the strength he had instilled in all of us. And in that moment, I knew that I was honoring him in the best way I could, by living a life that reflected everything he had stood for. After the guests had left and the house was quiet once more, I sat in the garden, the stars twinkling above me. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the pain, the fight for justice. It had been a long, difficult journey, but I had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to protect what mattered most. Victor's voice echoed in my mind, a memory from years ago. The measure of a person isn't how they act when things are easy. It's how they act when everything falls apart. Everything had fallen apart, but I survived. And in the process, I had discovered a strength I didn't know I had. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all.